So today I just want to mention some things, and I'm not sure if I want to draw conclusions about what I found. I'm not sure that I have a detailed conclusion, but we can talk about some things anyway. So the Committee of Detail for the Constitution was a group of men, and this is just from Wikipedia: John Rutledge, Edmund Randolph, Oliver Ellsworth, James Wilson, Nathaniel Gorman, all lawyers. John Rutledge trained in England at the Middle Inn, and he was also called, Dictator John. He was, I think they said, the first Supreme Court justice. Well, he wrote the Constitution. Well, he helped organize the Constitution and helped come up with the phrases used in the Constitution. This wasn't something arbitrarily done. This was done with intent. It was done for proper grammar. It was done for legal content. And so if you want to do research on the Committee of Detail, of course you can do so. So let's look at these phrases in the Constitution. I have underlined the first part of the phrase in purple and the second part in green. I think there's one part in here where I made a mistake. So we the people of the United States, a Congress of the United States, a citizen of the United States, Congress of the United States, Senate of the United States. A citizen of the United States, and notice the capitalizations also. The Vice President of the United States, Office of President of the United States, the President of the United States, Treasury of the United States, Civil Office under the authority of the United States. Again, the President of the United States, President of the United States, Defense and General Welfare of the United States, money on the credit of the United States, securities and current coin of the United States, in the service of the United States, the Treasury of the United States. In Article 2, we're talking about the President. A President of the United States of America. There's only a couple of times where "of the United States of America" is written in this document. Once there, once in the preamble, and I believe the only other place is at the very end when they signed. C, of the government of the United States. Citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution, which is an important addition to the phrase. President of the United States, Constitution of the United States, Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, not the United States of America, Militia of the several states. So that's different. The militia is different. The actual service of the United States, civilians, ambassadors, public ministers, consuls, judges, officers of the United States. Civilian is different from capital C, citizens of the United States. Civilians, as well as entities registered doing business with the United States according to case law, are called United States citizens. But they receive a compensation for their services from the United States, but they're not citizens of the United States. It's clear that they are different. They are United States citizens. These are not arbitrary phrases. Officers of the United States, President, Vice President, and civil officers of the United States, judicial power of the United States, Constitution and the laws of the United States, the Constitution and the laws of the United States, authority of the United States, executive and judicial officers, both of the United States, and signed the 17th day of September in the year of our Lord 1787, and of the independence of the United States of America. So why is it here of the United States of America, where everywhere else is of the United States? Because the United States is different. The United States is a seat and places purchased. Here I came up with a list from memory.loc.gov. My search query was, quote, United States citizen, end quote. It came up with several results. The first, I think 3 didn't actually have the phrase. It had part of the phrase, but not the whole phrase. Now let's just look here at some of the things that I found on memory.libraryofcongress.gov. So by 1868, we were, this is a Civil War period. This was after Lincoln. Lincoln did a lot of bad things to the country. I believe illegal and outside his office, his constitutional office, which make them void. His acts are void, in my opinion. And it says here, we just want to look at the phrases. The loyal citizens of the states of Louisiana and Arkansas. To me, this means the military people, because state of Louisiana and state of Arkansas are the military, but also include United States citizens who work on those lands, those federal lands inside Louisiana and Arkansas. Those federal lands create a state overseen by the federal government. So a federal state, which is a dependent state, and inside, these dependent states are inside the independent states just called Louisiana and Arkansas, and we'll see hints of that here in a minute. Then we have a citizen of South Carolina. So not a citizen of the United States or a citizen of the state of South Carolina, but just a citizen of South Carolina. So he may have been a militia person and then returned to his state. And so he's asking for relief from a disability he incurred from the war. A senator, now this, he has to be, according to the Constitution, a citizen of the United States, but he's located inside the state of Georgia. So a senator-elect from the state of Georgia, together with the governor of the state of Georgia, the governor acting as governor of the state of Georgia, the state of Georgia being the federal lands inside Georgia. And this is just my understanding of the papers. The Memorial of Citizens of Tennessee. So it's probably talking about a militia memorial for the people who were in the Civil War acting as militiamen, who after the war returned to their state and become citizens of Tennessee, no longer citizens of the state of Tennessee, because no longer being in the militia since the war is over, they return back to their independent state called Tennessee. I could be wrong. So page 35, 36, and 37 go together. And what we have here is an issue with, it's December 9th, 1868, an issue with a foreign country, I believe. And there's a man who's working for the government, but as a minister. So I believe ministers, according to the Constitution, are under the president, who's the executive officer, who appoints civil, as the United States executive of the United States of America. He is a civil officer, and that's why he can be either a citizen of the United States or a natural born citizen, because he has to appoint ministers, consuls, judges, ambassadors. And if you notice, judges in Article 3 are not required to be, quote, capital C, citizens of the United States. So I'm guessing that these functions are civilian, and so because they are civilians working for the federal government, they're actually called United States citizens. So we look here and it says Charles A. Washburn, late, so he's deceased, United States Minister to Hawaii, having resigned and being desirous to return to the United States, the Rear Admiral commanding the South Atlantic Squadron was early directed to send a ship of war to Asuncion, the capital of Paraguay, to receive Mr. Washburn and his family, because even though he's a civilian, he's serving in an official capacity overseas, and so his family has the right to some benefits, okay? So his family was with him, which it doesn't really matter in this case about his family having benefits, but if you've been watching my videos, it may make sense to you when I say that and you put it together with some of the other videos that I've done. If he was on a federal military post, his wife would have the benefit of being placed in an employment position if she can qualify at least to some extent, or at least test to be able to do the job. And she's given the benefit of being able to be considered ahead of others, like people coming off post to fill those positions, like natives of Paraguay or something. let's see, his family and remove them from a situation which was represented to be endangered by faction and foreign war. Let's see, in the meantime, I'm going to go right here. In the meantime, an excited controversy had arisen between the president of Paraguay and the late United States minister, Mr. Washburn. In connection with the controversy represents that 2 United States citizens attached to the legation were arbitrarily seized at his side. So 2 of his fellow employees or civil servants were seized, and they were United States citizens because they were working in an official capacity, though they were not in a military position. This is the way I understand it. Here we have in 1864 citizens of the United States. Okay, these are all merchants, commanders of ships, and others. So it's talking about, I believe, the military overseas, and I think this is Honduras. Yes, it's Honduras. That they should have liberty to go out into Honduras to do shopping and hang out with the natives. And those are the citizens of the United States, and the C should have been capitalized to be proper. And citizens of Honduras and absolute freedom, etc. Those are just citizens of Honduras. United States by the citizens of the Republic of Honduras. Citizens of the high contracting parties. Interesting phrase. I've never seen that before. And native citizens. They shall enjoy in this respect the same rights and privileges therein as native citizens. So it's talking about when it's, I believe when it's talking about when the United States sends people over there, either as ministers, being United States citizens, or it's members of its military, being citizens of the United States, that they are allowed to go out into Honduras and participate in the same privileges and rights that the native citizens would participate in. This is in 1848, March 13th. So we're getting closer back towards the Constitution. Okay, so resolved that document number 36 of the 3rd session, 27th Congress, containing information in regard to claims of United States citizens on the government of Haiti, be referred to the Committee of Foreign Affairs. Okay, so when they send, the federal government sends their representatives to places like Haiti, and they are injured in some sort of uprising or scuffle or war effort or what have you, when they are injured, just like when some of the United States citizens or civil servants were taken captive by the Japanese, they had suffered injuries, they were allowed to make claims against the United States for making them whole again for their injuries, right? So there's more on this type of thing when it comes to the war with Japan. As citizens, like people working for the government with the military, being injured due to some war thing. Because they're not in the military, they can receive compensation for injuries just like the military members do when they leave the service. They can apply for disability. So Mr. James G. Hampton presented resolutions of the legislature of the state of New Jersey. So the way I understand this is that when the people of the independent state vote for a representative in their state, the representative also becomes a representative of the federal state, the dependent state, and the state. So you have a relationship where the inhabitants of the independent state are represented by their legislator, but those same legislators also represent the contracts between the independent state, like Republic of Texas, and the dependent state, which would be state of Texas, and state of Texas would be all the federal areas in Texas. Okay, so they have two jobs. They have to represent the state people, and they have to represent the federal people. And the federal people are in state of Texas, or state of New Jersey, or state of Tennessee, or state of South Carolina. And the people, the inhabitants, are represented by the Republic of Texas. Okay, so you have two, kind of like two states in one state, because states are just your, whatever you're organized, whatever government you're organized under. Well, when the independent state gave up lands to the federal government erected inside the Republic of Texas, or inside Texas, a new government, but it's a federal government for federal people on the federal lands, called State of Texas. And if that doesn't make sense to you, you can watch some of my other videos on state. Okay, so the navigation of the Passaic River and legislature of the state of Pennsylvania. Okay, so that's the legislators legislating for the federal areas, because some states reserved all their rights to regulate the federal areas except for military purposes, because that's what the federal Constitution really is for. It's for regulating the military, making laws for the military. Here's a journal of the House of Representatives, 1789, ordered that the said petition be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, lowercase s. And they've changed it around to where sometimes it's an uppercase s, sometimes it's a lowercase s. The sergeant at arms shall be appointed to hold his office during the pleasure of the House, whose duty it shall be to attend the House during its sitting, to execute the commands of the House from time to time. In all such process, a proper symbol of office shall be provided for the sergeant at arms. Vending and disposing of the said books within the United States. So I believe, let me see, of the state of South Carolina was presented to the House to and read, setting forth that he has, at great expense of time and money, published a book entitled The History of the Revolution of South Carolina from a British province to an independent state, that he has also prepared and proposes shortly to propose another book under the title of The History of the American Revolution, and praying that a law may pass for securing to the petitioner, his heirs, and assigns for a certain term of years the sole and exclusive right of vending and disposing of the said books within the United States. I believe that David Ramsey was probably an officer, because the officers, since they're on federal lands, in Article 1, Section 8, the right to their discoveries and copyrights and such are given to those people on the federal lands by the federal government, just as an employee would receive from its employer. When the employer is paying their employee to do some things, they would have a contract in place setting, if the employee would receive any money or benefit or right to his discoveries while working for the employer. It's the same thing here. The employees, being the military officers, are guaranteed a right to their patents, trademarks, copyrights, discoveries, etc. So everyone going up to the United States and putting in their right to their patents and stuff is really outside the scope of the Constitution. That he may receive the patronage of Congress to enable him to perform a voyage to Baffin's Bay for the purpose of making magnetical experiments to ascertain the causes of the variation of the needle and how near the longitude may thereby be ascertained. A member returned to service in this House as one of the representatives for the state of South Carolina, the federal state, was, at the time of his election, ineligible thereto, and came within the disqualification. And I didn't print out the next page, so. Now, remembering the phrases that we saw in the Constitution of the United States, such and such of the United States, I'm going to look at how they managed to just, change things. I believe this was from Title V. The United States government, whereas before it was the government of the United States. United States citizens are the civilians working for the federal government, and also the corporations registered as contractors doing business with the federal government, either a appropriated fund instrumentality or a non-appropriated fund instrumentality. Establish procedures for ensuring that United States citizens who have incurred service obligations as a result of receiving financial support for education and training from the United States government, not the government of the United States, with the United States government. Okay, and then it has federal employees, which are civil servants, federal employees. And of course, here we have, this is from 2004. Now, we've gone from the Constitution to 2004. In all these years, things have been distorted, they've been changed, they've been altered. They don't have the same meaning that it has in the Constitution, the way it was written in the Constitution when they changed the phrases. Phrases are important. They're written as phrases for a purpose. They mean something. So when they change it to the United States Supreme Court, instead of the Supreme Court of the United States or the Justices of the United States, it appears as though it's something different. The United States District Court instead of the District Court of the United States. The United States Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. Now here in 28 USC, which is Judiciary and Judicial Procedure, they write it correctly, Supreme Court of the United States. However, Supreme in the Constitution is actually lowercase. Chief Justice of the United States, that's correct. Judges of the Supreme Court, seems fairly right. Okay, so when they did that, they got it right. Now this is the very first Supreme Court case that I could find anyway, 1791. Supreme Court of the United States, August term, 1791. Now, other than the uppercase Supreme Court, it's written correctly. This is not too hard to find if you want to find it online. And here we have State of Maryland. Okay. State of New York. First Congressional Session, Chapter 20, an act to establish the judicial courts of the United States, 1789. Of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that the Supreme Court of the United States shall consist of such and such and so forth, and reside in the district. Okay, So the Constitution does say that the Congress has a right to make laws, but they have a right to make laws for the United States. I don't see that it has the right to make laws for the United States of America. The only person who can do anything for the United States of America that I can see in the Constitution is the president when he acts as the executive officer. I see that here. All legislative powers, meaning specific powers because it's capitalized, herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. And then it really just talks about their qualifications. And then you get down to Section 8. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, such and such, da-da-da-da. Credit of the United States, on and on. And then where they can do those things is in 17, seat and places purchased. So then we move to Texas v. White, which appears to me not to follow the Constitution at all, because it's basically a taking of land which it was not given, which are not federal lands, which were not purchased, and also a taking of resources. And it's called United States Supreme Court, Texas v. White. So why is it United States Supreme Court when in the Constitution they'd never created a United States Supreme Court? They created a Supreme Court of the United States. Judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court. The Constitution and laws of the United States, not the United States of America. Because the United States of America appears to be for the states and the civilians coming from the state and working on the federal lands, not the federal people. The federal people appear to be citizens of the United States. And they have to have qualifications of 7 and 9 years, whereas the justices, their only qualification is good behavior. Military people can't not be, in some instances, expected to have good behavior because they're in the military. And they're supposed to win wars. And winning wars, sometimes you have to use deceptive practices. But the thing is they're not supposed to use them against the people they're supposed to protect. They're supposed to use them against an enemy. So it's a Congress of the United States who makes powers or makes rules and laws for the United States of America, and for the United States being the seat of government and the federal areas inside the states, and not the United States of America, because those are people off post, or United States citizens who are people off post who go on to post to work and they work with the military, receive compensation from the federal government for their services, and have a right to make claims for injuries they may have incurred in line of duty. Okay, so the phrases, I believe, are there for a specific purpose. I cannot anywhere find any book that talks about phrases, legal phrases, or the way things were written back in the 1700s but I'll continue to look, and if I find anything, I will surely post it. But I wanted to get this video out to you as something to think about the phrases and the way they're written in the Constitution and how they've changed over time. And what does it mean? Does it mean anything that these phrases have changed? I believe that the change in phrases are an expansion of jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is their power and authority. Something else you can see in the Constitution are the specific powers and authorities given to each of those offices. So we have capital P powers under Section 1. And then if we look at, the Senate probably has some powers listed too. Executive power. Okay. A president of the United States of America in charge of the civilians that are working with the federal government, and the officers when they're working in a civil capacity. So like on the military post, the officers are allowed to have a business because they weren't expected to rely completely on their federal salaries. So the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and the militia of the several states, which is the United States of America. I guess it's hard to tell sometimes. When called into the actual service of the United States, it could be militia of the several states after they've been called into service, and then they go onto the federal lands because that's what they have to do. They have to report for duty. And then their officer in charge of them marches them wherever they need to go under presidential orders. And he has the power to do this, that, and the other, and whatever else. Same with Article 3, judicial power. They're specific. They're very specific. And they apply on federal lands. And then you have a federal state, and then you have the state that created the federal government, which is the independent state. Okay, so just something to look at, something to think about. The phrases are very specific in the Constitution. They're very repetitive. They're you can just see them. You can see they stand out at you once you start looking for them, and you start seeing the differences. And then you might start to realize that the federal government is very small. There's only 5 pages here. I think the Texas Constitution is twice as long at least. That's for the Republic of Texas. And how, if you look at some of their laws, for people who like to look at the laws, the federal phrases change throughout time, and they change as the Supreme Court and the federal judges expand the meaning of all these words and phrases in the Constitution. Now, I'm not saying they changed the definition of words. I don't believe the definition of words can be changed. They just expand how they use them. Okay? They expand the form that they can take, the metaphors they use to explain their words and phrases. They use these things to expand and expand and expand, and before we know it, we have millions of people marching to Washington over the abortion laws, when the abortion laws that the Supreme Court rules on is for the state of whatever state, which are the federal lands and the federal people on those lands, and not for private citizens or civilians, private civilians not working with the federal government that are in the state. The state, your original state, Virginia, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Republic of Texas, whatever, Texas, they make abortion laws for their citizens. If you don't work for the federal government, you're not in a dependent state, and you're not in the state of. If you work for the federal government and you work on the federal lands, if you're a military person, you're a citizen of the United States inside the dependent state, because the federal lands are the dependent states, and you come under the authority of the federal government. And if you're a civilian and you work on the federal lands, when you're on the federal lands, you're a United States citizen and you're in that dependent state. But when you go home off the federal lands, you're back in your independent state as a private citizen. If you take property onto a military post, it's your private property, but you give up the right to not have your stuff searched. So when you are entering that gate, you're agreeing to searches and seizures at the whim of the military police. They don't have to have a reason. And a lot of people are confused, including the police, because it's been an expansion of jurisdiction, expansion. All power corrupts, and power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But it applies even on an individual level. Individuals are corrupt, but the system is corrupt also. Okay, so the system is constantly searching for power. Even though it's not a sentient being, it's just doing what it does. It's just expanding and expanding and expanding. And so now people have no idea what their state does and what the federal government does. They don't even know that the federal laws only apply on the federal lands. Now, if you have personal property, that's different, because that's property that the federal government has issued to you: a canteen, a blanket, a computer, an ID card. If you get that ID card and then you no longer work for the federal government, as a civilian or a military person, you have to give that card back. It's not private property, it's personal property. Your vehicle and your purse and your clothing and your shoes, that's your private property. If you take it on a military post, it's subject to search at any time. Your personal property is not something that belongs to you privately. It's something that belongs to the government, that they allow for your use by yourself. So you're not going to go around and let everybody drink out of your canteen, because it's personal to you, meaning it's for you individually, for your use. If you want to let somebody else drink out of your canteen, as disgusting as that is, you can, but it's still considered your personal property. So if you break that canteen, you're the one responsible for it. If you lose your blanket, you got to pay for it. If your computer breaks because you picked it up and threw it on the floor, that's your fault. And you will probably have to pay for it. And I don't know if you remember, but years ago, there was some Clinton issue about her using her personal government issued BlackBerry for private purposes, scheduling parties or chatting with her friends about private matters on a government BlackBerry issued to her for her personal but government related use. Okay, so she can take it home, but she's still supposed to use it for work. Okay, so words and phrases, and they all have meaning, and they've expanded. The courts have expanded, and we learned about that in my videos that I did on legal fictions, how they expand things and they expand things and they expand their meaning of things, even though they're outside of the actual definition of the words, or kind of within the definition of the word, but they're expanding how they use the word. So they can use the word for a lot of different purposes. Biology uses words for biological purposes, but chemistry can use the same word for a different description of a different thing. And the law can use it for a description of a different thing, but the word still means just what the word means. It's the way it's used. So the justices have just been expanding their power, expanding their authority by making the words and phrases more vague and changing them and adding things and all this sort of stuff. So I will be doing, in addition to this video at some point in time, hopefully, if I can find some sort of book that describes specifically words and phrases in a legal sense at the time of the writers of the Constitution. If anyone has one out there, then post it in the comments section. I'd love to take a look at it.